I'm Alex Hirsch, the voice of Quentin Tremblay.
I'm Michael Rianda, the voice of, okay, we got to start over.
No, let's keep going.
No, the voice of, who's the pool, Mr. Poolcheck. Right, guys? You all know Mr. Poolcheck.
And this is Irrational Treasure. This was our sort of National Treasure kind of conspiracy Da Vinci Code spoof episode.
Well, it mainly came from Alex having this idea about a president who was totally insane, who, changed the national currency to waffles or whatever. But that's not one of the jokes in the show.
I think that came from, I had done a short film about Teddy Roosevelt where I was like, what if I just said that he was completely insane and had multiple personalities and waged war against the sky, and I did this obnoxious bully, Panama Canal voice. And for some reason that was really funny to me, the idea of an insane president. It's not funny anymore in 2018, but at the time Jesus it was
Christ.
hilarious.
Yeah.
And I was like, and I really enjoyed dumb historical conspiracies.
Yeah.
Like as a kid, I was obsessed with Masons, and I would go around cemeteries and I'd notice Masonic symbols, and I'd try to sneak into like Masonic buildings, and just this idea that everything in America is connected. Like as a kid, I would look at the back of the dollar bill, and that's where Bill cipher comes from.
Yeah, totally.
Is the pyramid on the back of the bill, and there'd be an older kid who tells you, oh, there's like an owl hiding in the weird filaments next to the thing. So like I wanted to do an episode that was all about those conspiracies, but it proved to be really hard to write, actually.
Yeah, totally. We went through a bunch of different drafts of this one, and where there was like it was like a bunch of evil librarians at one point, and this was like one of those crazy ones that we literally wrote in like the 48 hours before storyboard artists had to draw it.
Well, there had been many drafts, and our writers were doing great work in those drafts, but the problem was I'd given them an impossible assignment.
Yeah.
I'd said, hey, writers, I need to do an episode that's thematically about Mabel questioning her own silliness, and it's also about her rival Pacifica, and it's also about this mystery with this president, and it's also about Pioneer Day. It was so many ideas that like our writers did a great job with an impossible assignment, and it still didn't work.
Yeah, totally.
And so we had to swoop in and be like, oh no, we've got. But when the sun rises, we're gonna have to hand this script off to the storyboard artists who are gonna draw it, and it doesn't make any sense yet.
Yeah, totally. And we also wrote versions that didn't make sense too, but we needed to
100%.
But we were just there. We just wouldn't leave the studio until it was at least makeable.
Yeah.
At least releasable.
So Pacifica Northwest, this is a character who started out as, I think, one of my weaknesses as a writer, particularly at the beginning, starting out, is Dipper, Mabel, Stan, Seuss. They all came from observed places. Right?
Yeah.
They all came from people I knew in life or something I'd observed. And then characters like Pacifica existed as a foil. I didn't think of her as a fully dimensional character. I just thought, if Mabel's a sweetheart, she should have somebody who's the opposite of Mabel.
Yeah.
Somebody who is cold and calculated and jealous and obsessed with image and obsessed with her friends. And so we created this just really poisonous, hateful character. And it was kind of tough, because we realized, we really, really don't like this character.
Yeah.
In season 2, we said, let's try to breathe some life into her, and we tried a couple of times, can we add any dimension to this character? But that was one of the challenges with this episode, where she was just so mean.
Yeah, and I think that was some of the times when the show was at its best, was us being really honest with ourselves about times when we had characters in the show that were kind of non-dimensional and were kind of these ciphers, and how could we actually dimensionalize them and make them real characters that you care about, and that, because in real life that happens so often, where it's like you hate a kid at school,
you meet
or
someone,
something.
you have a first impression of them, and there's more going on.
Yeah, it's like the Breakfast Club, and you're like, oh, he's got a hard time at home, and whatever. Like, everybody has a story, everybody's a person. And we wanted to, and that was another sort of rule of the show, was we never wanted to be hateful. We always wanted to try to see the best in people, even if they were a annoying bad character. Try to give them some dimension.
We would notice that there'd be a lot of, in kids TV, particularly in live action, characters who would be kind of snarky and aggressive and mean to each other, but for no reason.
Yeah, exactly.
Stan goes through a lot of random pain because he deserves it.
Yeah.
Generally, it was if a character is punished, it's usually because they kind of had it coming. Whether
Yeah.
it's Stan in this instance just being a real jerk to everybody.
Yeah.
You know, like Dipper goes through a lot of lumps, and a lot of that's like, you know, his kind of creepy over the top crush on Wendy.
Yeah.
You know, he needs to learn better.
Totally.
His intense self-seriousness. Dipper takes himself so seriously, so he like that's why he kind of earns these situations where
Yeah.
he kind of eats it. So trying to weave these two plots together was the hardest thing.
Yeah,
Was it
totally.
we liked the idea of an episode where Mabel's trying to prove that she can be serious.
Yeah.
Because it's so against her nature that seemed like it might be fun.
Yeah.
And we liked this idea that somehow there'd be a conspiracy, but those ideas do not connect. And that's
Yeah.
why this episode was broken until the 11th hour. And when this episode aired, we were expecting that people were just going to like
Boycott us.
Yeah, they'd just be like, it didn't work. The A plot and B plot were not synchronous. You failed, show canceled. And everybody was just like, oh, that was a fun adventure.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah.
But we wanted to disown this one by the time we were done with it because we just saw so many plot holes.
Yeah, this is one of the many ones that Alex was like, oh my God, we can't release this episode because we just had high expectations and you know, and it turns out that if you're going, you know, if you have crazy high expectations and you're trying to, you know, make it a 10, sometimes you end up making it a 6 or 7, but a 6 or 7 is still pretty good.
This is the whole reason this episode exists was an excuse for this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Was all the stuff that happens in Act 2. The idea of Dipper finding clues that lead to other clues that have historical secrets to them, that the town is this old town with a lot of history and that there might be all these hidden dimensions to every single statue.
I'm starting to accept it.
Yeah, well, and another challenge of this episode too was like the concept of silliness can sometimes like go into bad areas where it's sort of like Mabel feels like she's stupid or something, or it gets into this like you have to really ride the tone so Mabel doesn't feel like she's an idiot.
Oh, and
She
there
just
was an
feels
early
like-
draft of this where Pacifica actually called Mabel stupid.
Yeah.
And that Mabel was trying to prove that she was smart over the course of
Yeah.
the episode. And something about that felt wrong. It
yeah.
felt kind of mean-spirited. Like, we always think of Mabel as a smart character. We think
Yeah.
of her as being at least as smart as Dipper, if not smarter. The fact that she's goofing around all the time is a natural force of her personality.
Yeah.
She sees people taking themselves too seriously. She tries to stop them.
Yeah.
You know, she knows that people are kind of self-important.
And that she's generally, when she says something silly, she's typically joking around and she's self-aware rather than she's
It's
like...
a bit.
Yeah.
She's doing a little bit. She knows that she's doing it. She could stop it at any time
Yeah.
for the most part. You know, that was our goal with her, particularly when we started out. Again, this will look like, oh, look, that's Bill. They knew all about Bill. Like,
Yeah.
we knew that it was a cool image, and we would hide the Eye of Providence and Bill-looking
Yeah.
things all throughout the show. But again, at this point in the series, we weren't even sure if he was going to be a character or not.
Yeah, we felt like he probably would, but it was...
We didn't know how it was going to factor in.
Yeah, totally.
Wait, Mabel, you folded it into a map.
This was something that I actually like. I recently rewatched this episode, and I really do enjoy the way that Mabel's weird, creative way of acting
Yeah.
solves the problem.
Totally.
This is another good co-lead like Headhunters, where they really are both the lead of the show.
And didn't Ian Worrell, our director, like actually figured out how all that worked so you could really fold the map?
I think that might have been our artist Andy Gonsalves.
Oh, okay, cool.
Who was a prop designer on the show, who did every single page of the journal.
Andy was amazing.
Yeah.
He is amazing. He's not dead. He's very much alive, but he's great.
That we're in joke is one of the jokes that makes me actually laugh. Just because it really shows you Dipper's personality. Dipper takes himself so seriously.
Yeah.
Even when he's getting a pink balloon for Kids Discount Day, he really imagines himself to be a spy or something.
Quick. I have a feeling those cops weren't at the library to check out books.
I don't think the one with the bell can read.
So what is it anyway?
This is a total cheat. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious to anyone watching, but anybody who is sort of not paying very close attention, when we flip this painting, we cross-dissolve it with another image because it was too obvious when we didn't. Like, that's not really what it looks like upside down. We're completely cheating. This moment...
We tricked you, kids.
Yes! I don't think anyone was tricked.
Why did we
And this is a thing. Blubs and Derlin was a thing that we really found that we were having a good time with in rewriting the episode, just because just because they were such a funny team, and also again it's like just having a version of those two guys that liked each other. So it wasn't like tragic to watch them fail. It was like oh these two little gems.
I love watching Stan in the stocks.
Well, if it isn't Mabel's uncle, Mr. Pine,
She's
looking for this?
this is a moment. I think what I like so much about this is Stan's gleeful cruelty to Pacifica, because Pacifica so deserves like what's happening here.
Yeah.
And Stan's so excited to tell her she stinks. Like this, it always was sort of endearing when Stan could kind of use his jerkiness to stick up for what was right.
Yeah, it's like justice.
So I remember a lot of the late rewrites on this episode came from one particular night that I watched the National Treasure trailer online, and there was all these lines. It's just like all these lines of like, how are we gonna get in? We're gonna kidnap the president. We're gonna steal the Constitution, and we were just trying to find moments to have lines like that.
Conspiracy mode. I feel so serious.
Something that we're always trying to do also in writing is you're trying to constantly externalize internal things. You're looking for visual symbols to suggest an idea. And that's something that you often layer over the course of a process. So in this episode, Mabel, we wanted to show her descent. We wanted to show her transformation from her regular silly self to somebody who is trying to be serious back.
Yeah.
And so this whole episode, she's got her sweater tied around her waist to show like she's this Mabel in transition. The idea of the taffy that she's eating this toffee and then she's leaving these wrappers, and then they say that's how we followed you here because you were doing something silly like eating wrappers.
Yeah.
We're looking for always a visual way to still tell the same story point.
Totally.
Particularly in animation, often in a script-driven show, everything can just be talky and word jokes. And we were always looking for ways. Oh, I gotta stop myself. This is all written by Mike. Mike, can you talk about writing this? Freeze frame this if you haven't, kids.
Yeah, no, this is like that was like one of the most fun nights I ever had on the show. Was I just like locked myself in the room because when you're a kid and you're watching The Simpsons and stuff, it was so rewarding to pause the show and find jokes that were like just as funny as jokes that were in the rest of the episode. So we were like killing ourselves to come up with something.
I gave Mike
funny
the
and
assignment,
inspired.
fill this with nonsense, and I was so delighted. We only had a chance to really go that nuts a few times in the show.
Yeah.
Anybody watching the Mabel's Guide to Stickers, which I think is going to be on this DVD, freeze frame on the Aztec section, because it's Mike describing the entire plot of Air Bud in text.
And who is Quentin Trimble?
Yeah, and there's a joke in there. Writing cartoons is more important than sleep.
It's real.
Because me and Alex were like lived in our offices throughout this whole section, and we like people would literally have comments about how I personally stank, and they're like, "Could you get this guy out of the room? He hasn't showered in days." And I was like, "It's more important that I write this joke than I shower."
Our theory was that if we worked really hard and really loved that what we were doing, some of that love would somehow translate through into the show, even if it was never quite what we wanted.
Yeah, and even if people around us were suffering.
So this is a total cheat. We're like, this guy is from historically a time where there wouldn't have been footage, so we've got still images, but then we've got a voice over it. This doesn't make any historical sense, kids. If there's any of you out there who are really hoping Quentin Tremblay could canonically make sense, it doesn't really make sense. That's a total just Dudley Do-Right homage that he would be riding a horse backwards. This is that Chris Parnell?
Yeah, that's Chris Parnell.
He's the voice of the dad in Rick and Morty.
Yeah,
He's Dr. Spaceman on 30 Rock. Really great actor. We should have brought him in more. He did a great job as this
he's hilarious.
serious announcer. Where did the peanut brittle thing come from? Do you remember that?
That might have been Tim. That like I remember that was like I think in an outline or something that he was frozen in taffy. That might have been David Slack maybe.
It was. It turned out to be a really useful idea because it was something that Mabel could eat sadly eat it to break him out.
Yeah.
And it was, again, an example of how silly he was.
Yeah.
We loved the idea of bringing him back to life. We didn't want him to just be frozen in ice. We didn't want him to be, in like a bunker. That's sort of that Gravity Falls thing where we'd say, like, is there a way to do this idea, this trope that we haven't seen before? Even if it's really silly, that was better than just doing it straight.
Well, and that's also one of the things that we tried to do throughout the series is thematically tie the character's problem to the monster of the week, or the thing of the week in this case, which is Quentin Tremblay, where Mabel feels bad about her silliness and then is like vindicated by the silliest man on earth or whatever. And it's that's a way in which you could tell a fantastic story, but all have it come back to character at the end, so you care about it. It doesn't feel random like a Scooby-Doo episode.
Well,
no offense, Scooby-Doo.
No offense, Scooby-Doo. But Scooby-Doo, like original Scooby-Doo, was sort of our reference of what not to do in terms of like we do want to be surprised. We don't want to have the same plot every week, and we want there to be a theme.
Yeah.
We'd like it if by the end of the episode the characters have kind of grown in the dimension of some thematic idea. In this one, Mabel's theme is she doesn't want to be silly, and it's the silliest president in the world who teaches her that that's okay. I remember this scene really well in terms of the writing process, because I do remember the sun coming up, and I had written, they're trapped inside a wooden crate inside a train, and then you need to use silliness to get out of the box. And I was like, what have I done? I don't know how the heck they're going to get out of this box. And the idea that he sticks his finger out of the hole, wiggles it, and then a woodpecker chases it.
Yeah.
And then pecks the thing to pieces. Like, that was just like pure exhaustion adrenaline. I really like that Mabel and Quentin Tremblay immediately bond over having like completely terrible ideas. They're just trying to climb. Yeah, we'll leap through it. Yeah. We really liked the idea that there was some broad government conspiracy with government agents, and we never came back to those.
Yeah.
The agent in this episode talking to Blub's like, I hate to spoil the illusion for you kids, but like, we don't know who that is.
Yeah.
That never paid off. Like, my headcanon for that is that it's just a separate department within the government for this one conspiracy, and then it never was relevant again. But it would have been better if we had known where we were going with the agents to make that all set up. Another great cue by Brad.
Yeah, totally. No, yeah, Brad always killed like that. It's always nice when a part of the process is just like so consistently additive. And every time we'd see one of these episodes with music, it was like, oh, this is 10 times better.
Yeah, and that is something that, every stage in the writing, drawing, scripting, animating process is a chance to potentially add something to it. And there were definitely episodes where the entire time I was like, this isn't working, until Brad added his score, and I was like, oh, thank God.
Yeah.
Oh, that's now exciting that I'm now curious in this section.
Yeah.
Maybe we didn't write it well enough to make me curious, but the music cue made me curious.
Totally. Music's very powerful.
I've had a lot of people harass me on Twitter about this idea that because Quentin Tremblay never resigned, he's still legally president. They're like, I've read the Constitution, and it doesn't work that way. But we were fine with this.
Yeah.
As a solution.
I mean, there's a lot of doesn't stand up to that kind of scrutiny.
We tended to follow a more comedic and emotional logic.
Yeah, totally.
Rather than actual logic.
Yeah. No, there were often times where we were throwing actual logic out the window because it felt, even though it was technically more right, it kind of felt wrong in your gut.
Yeah, like to us the important thing here was that Mabel has her silliness validated.
Yeah.
She sees that somebody silly could even be president, and that they all work together to save the day using Dipper's left brain, Mabel's right brain, his silliness. Him calling Dipper Roderick was also something where everyone's like, oh, Dipper's name is secretly Roderick.
Yeah.
It's like, no, he's Quentin Tremblay. He calls
he's a
Dipper
maniac.
Roderick. Yeah.
Around and spanked me with a paddle for like 3 hours. Bottom line, George Washington was a jerk.
Agreed.
Everyone can agree that George Washington was a jerk.
We also like the idea of giving kids historically inaccurate.
Yeah.
We really love the idea of just like, okay, these facts are wrong and you know them now.
Yeah.
Who is that idiot?
Well, and especially because Pacifica's so irredeemable in this episode, we thought it would be fun to actually have the message of the show be about how sometimes revenge is great.
That was just, it was just one of these things where we knew Mabel learns her lesson.
Yeah.
Right? Mabel learns not to care what Pacifica thinks. She's grown over the course of the episode. Dipper doesn't have an arc.
Yeah.
So we're like, I think he's free to just throw it in Pacifica's face because like that's what we're feeling right now.
Totally. Well, and some of that was our frustration in writing her. We felt like we never, and you guys did a way better job in later episodes, but we felt like we never cracked her character. So we're like, well, if the character's gonna be this much of a pain, we might as well make fun of it.
Enjoy making her foil.
Yeah.
Your whole family's a fraud. Deal with it.
It's a good Jason Reed there. That was great.
Revenge is underrated.
Revenge is underrated. Another good children's lesson for kids. Speaking again about the idea of making episode concepts visual. Mabel has now, not only has she put her sweater back on, but she's also got a top hat.
Yeah.
And Dipper has done something that's one of his greatest dreams of all time, which is go through a real historical conspiracy.
Yeah.
And he gets to keep this president's key and this negative $12 bill.
Yeah.
Like that's sort of one of these, the old idea of the story circle and a character goes into a place and then comes back with something. They bring something back from the adventure was important to us. And in season 2, we hide a lot of these things that the kids collected in their adventures in the background.
And we, in later episodes too, we got smarter about this stuff where it's like, oh, if there's a president's key, we should have a use for it later or something.
We were never able to pay off that one. That's still one of my regrets. We always wanted to do a sequel to this episode, Irrational Treasure 2, the Trembly Supremacy or something.
Yeah. It was. It never got past the outline phase.
This was probably the very last thing done in the episode. I think I was drawing and voicing this in the edit room the day before we sent it to Korea.
This cracks me up.
We think babies are funny, and there's a lot of dumb baby jokes in the show, whether it's Time Baby or whether it's these Congress babies.
Yeah.
It's a dark day for America.